Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a world where soap was rarer than unicorns, baths felt like medieval science experiments, and garlic reigned supreme as both perfume and plague protection. Picture scrubbing yourself with onion-infused water because hot tubs were literally thought to be gateways for evil humors, and your neighbor casually flinging chamber pot leftovers out their window totally normal. So, before you crinkle your nose, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I'm always curious which time zones are holding their breath alongside us. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Once you've hit like and settled into the soothing atmosphere of this video, imagine yourself wading into the icy currents of history where taking a bath was no longer a luxury, but a terror. You not only hear the rough linen rubbing against skins, but also inhale the sharp tang of hot water mixed with vinegar and herbs, as if a voice whispers in your ear, "Don't bathe too much, or you'll invite disease right in." History tells us that by the 13th, 14th centuries, the once thriving Roman-style public bathhouses were falling silent. Monasteries still maintained their soaking pools and steam rooms, so much so that Pope Innocent X once praised post-pilgrimage baths. Yet after the mid-14th century Black Death decimated tens of millions, the belief that hot water opens pores and lets disease in gripped Europe. In panic, bathhouses were boarded up or abandoned entirely, seen as a public health hazard. Picture, if you will, figures drifting behind veils of fragrant steam, and believe it or not, in some parts of Lotharingia folk whispered that bathing in magical waters turned your hair a ghostly blue. Local herbalists supposedly soaked licorice flowers to impart that eerie hue. So, the next time you brag about your peppermint-scented exfoliant, ask yourself, can modern cosmetics outdo dyeing your hair with otherworldly blooms? Historians still debate whether the collapse of public bathing stemmed chiefly from plague fears or from a church-led campaign branding bathhouses dens of moral decay. Some claim Pope Nicholas V, 1455–1458, issued decrees limiting large public gatherings, including baths, while others argue that the fervor of the crusading spirit had already cast suspicion on any venue where, too many naked bodies mingled. You might smile at the thought of their dry spa routine, wiping face, hands and feet with rough cloths soaked in herbal infusions, swabbing underarms with vinegar, an 800-year-old version of today's sponge bath or deodorant spray. The wealthy indulged in seasonal soaks scented with lavender or rosemary. The common folk scoured rivers, wooden tubs, or metal basins of tepid water for a quick dash of relief. If you find the idea of a dry bath harsh, remember this. They saw it as duping both disease and gossiper, subtle self-defense, not unlike wearing a face mask during flu season. In that dank, herb-scented room, did you know people sometimes scattered ash or dried mugwort around their tubs to ward off restless spirits clinging to their skin? Strange as it sounds, they preferred the odor of smoldering embers to rumors of haunted waters. The story doesn't end with physical fears. Scholars continue to debate how much dry bathing syndrome actually curbed plague transmission. Some modern studies note, even today, tiny English communities preserve a midsummer rain bath tradition and exercise in willpower and bonding with nature. Might that be a subtle act of defiance against ecclesiastical edicts? You may wonder, if you had to choose between soaking in a tub of dry sand or wading through a channel of wine, the aristocratic spa du jour, which would haunt you less? Some nobles reportedly bathed in rose-pink salt water, convinced its minerals would leave their skin pearly white. More amusingly, accounts speak of a few counts hiring professional louse hunters, wielding fine combs to pluck every flea from their hair before stepping into royal baths. Tonight's journey is more than fog and the drip-drip of water. It's proof of humanity's astonishing resilience. From bustling Roman bathhouses to makeshift vinegar cloth rubs, medieval people devised their own strategies to confront fear and prejudice. So, as you feel the fan's gentle breeze and hear the SSs of straw beneath your bed, remember, no matter how brave, we all find ways to stay clean in a world without electricity or TikTok. And once you've washed yourself here and there with that little herbal dampened cloth to fool both disease and prying eyes, imagine the second challenge medieval folk faced: how to keep up a presentable appearance in a world that showed no mercy to unpleasant smells. With full-body baths suspected of opening you up to all manner of sickness, localized washing became the go-to trick for putting on a clean front. Each morning, you wouldn't dash into an ice-cold river like some stalwart YouTube fitness guru. Instead, you'd dab your face, around your eyes, your temples, then the wrists and tops of your feet with a soft cloth dipped in warm water spiked with apple cider vinegar and bitter herbs. That faint shh as you stroke the fabric across your skin is your personal wake-up kalike. A tiny handheld fan, refreshing without plunging you headfirst into the cold. Historically speaking, by the 14th century, many European towns had passed ordinances barring unwashed people from entering churches, so people quickly learned to locate their own high-traffic zones of cleanliness. You'd edge to the end of a pew or a corner of the nave and briskly wipe your face and neck before anyone in a cassock could glare your way. Among the nobility, Portable's odor-banishing workshops were entrusted to servants, eunuchs and ladies, in waiting concocted vinegar, and herb cocktails, sometimes sweetened with a touch of honey, and gently anointed a lord's temples, cheeks and wrists after the hunt or just before bedtime. Picture a medieval spa experience, minus the cushioned massage table and ambient whale song playlist. This damp cloth solution did more than keep flies at bay. Those sharp tangs of vinegar and botanical bitterness deterred. Insects it also served as a rapid facelift before meeting officials or clerics. When you strode into a tribunal or approached the altar, the faintly scented clasp of your hands showed you had not entirely neglected personal upkeep. Historians still debate whether washing with vinegar actually prevented disease or was simply a woodland superstition dressed up as medicine. Commoners, lacking retinues of attendants, improvised a professional routine of their own. Before heading to the fields or the hearth, they'd comb out tangles, scrape teeth with a primitive pick, and then quickly rinse hands and feet from a small basin. Their handkerchiefs doubled as multi-tool swiping sweat from their brows at harvest, blotting grime after lunch, or discreetly covering their noses when passing over swampy ground. You might smirk at the image of a peasant milking a cow while ripping out a cloth to scrub his ankles, praying nobody caught sight of his tattered tunic. Yet this simple tactic earned them a reprieve from both disdainful stares and the buzzing of flies. Their resolve to present themselves well rivals your own determination to ration every last drop of hand sanitizer in your modern bathroom. In certain coastal regions, people even carried smudge-stick bundles of mugwort or rosemary, lighting the ends and letting the smoke swirl around them to cleanse bad vibrations. It's the medieval equivalent of your friend's yoga studio sage ritual and ancient detox for body and spirit. The coziest moment was pressing that herbal-soaked cloth to the instep of your foot, hearing the faint rustle of leaves against skin, breathing in that tangy, slightly bitter scent and for an instant forgetting the stench of the pigsty next door. All that remained was the warmth and a fledgling confidence. I'm still cleaner than that straw mattress. Moreover, every dap of water across your hands and face was like updating your antivirus software. People believed germs, if they existed, lurked in high-traffic zones, like palms and insteps, much as we worry about doorknobs today. At least, after the wash, they hoped any lurking evils had been swept away with the rinse. Given their rudimentary medical knowledge, many swore that splashing vinegar water on the eyes could flush out the agents of medieval blindness, though nobody dared crank the heat too high. Local tinkers even tried fashioning germ-viewing lenses from bits of glass, only to amuse themselves with bubbles and distorted reflections. Amid plagues and social pressure, this clean-on-the-fly method let people protect both their public standing and their breath. It sounds straightforward, but imagine facing the 14th century with no hand soap gel, no body wash, just a handful of vinegars, herbs, and a trusty lady-in-waiting. Then you'd know it was as daunting as your own teenage face mask experiment on a Zoom call. Before we delve into more of medieval sleep's curious rituals, ask yourself, if today you only washed your face, hands, and feet with a vinegar, dampened cloth, would you dare face your boss? Dare kiss your partner? And do you think a whiff of apple cider vinegar can keep nosy onlookers at bay? Keep these questions in mind as our fragrant voyage continues to unfold unexpected wonders. After you've kept up appearances with your herbal cloth, The next step is to pay attention to your hair and teeth, two trouble spots that medieval folks feared almost as much as the plague. They believed hair needed good airflow to ward off wind chill, and that it was prime real estate for fleas and lice parasites in league with disease. Every morning, you'd hear the gentle click-clack of a wooden or bone comb carved with ornate patterns, an ASMR-like ritual, as you methodically work each tooth of the comb through your hair, imagining crushed eggshell or wood ash shampoo gliding along each strand. It feels oddly satisfying, even though you know the smoky scent might be a bit salty. Historically, in 1272 under King Edward I, England's Barber-Surgeon Guild was founded, regulating both haircutting and tooth extraction by professionals to prevent rogue barbers from butchering clients. This wasn't just a medical milestone, but also underscored the importance of personal grooming even if the tools were still rudimentary. You gently part your hair, picturing a high-end salon, except there's no cushioned chair, only a rickety wooden stool. The nobility spent hours on elaborate braids, dyeing hair with tobacco leaf, rustic berries, or beet juice. Scholars still debate whether these dye recipes contain toxic lead, or if that's just rumor. You lift each lock, comb from root to tip, and think, with modern tech, we'd never endure scratchy, dandruff-laden scalps like this. Meanwhile, fleas and lice hopping through your locks are more relentless than social media ads, so you pinch and flick with the comb to defeat them. Wealthy households even hired specialist louse catchers, armed with tiny sharp combs to pluck every parasite from their lord or lady's hair, making you quip. Today we detox at spas. Back then they detoxed from lice. What's the difference? Next up, your teeth, another source of medieval horror. Without a toothbrush, you roll a thin cloth around your finger, apply soot from the soapberry tree, crushed seashell powder, and sea salt, then scrub teeth and gums until you hear that gritty scritch-scratch, like a primitive dental drill removing stubborn plaque. Some chewed on mint sprigs, lemon balm, or eucalyptus leaves to camouflage bad breath, an early form of natural gum. In noble circles, mouthwash meant swishing spiced wine, both antiseptic and a statement of class. They'd tilt back a sip of red wine, savor its aroma, then grin wide and say, "Worried about garlic breath? Try my vintage Bordeaux." Historians still argue whether the tannins really killed germs or merely dried your mouth so no bacteria could survive. Now you've tamed your hair and polished your smile. But remember, every bone comb and mouth rinse represents a battle against nature and social stigma. A little jest. If someone teases you about crooked teeth, reply with a grin, "I'm just embracing rustic charm and natural disinfectant." Behind these humble grooming acts lies a wealth of medical and cultural history. In 1348, when the Black Death ravaged Europe, the need to exterminate parasites grew desperate. People believed that the scent of rosemary, eggshell, salt, and ash could repel the miasma of disease. These medieval lavatories weren't just for cleanliness, but for survival, like your modern face mask. Amid all these rituals, you might wonder, am I fooling both my health and my fears? But in their world, each hack was the pinnacle of contemporary wisdom. You might smile and think, today's snow foam spa is nothing compared to that soapberry ash salt combo. Oh, so you've just completed your hair and dental care routine, small acts, rich in survival strategy and cultural meaning. Relax your shoulders, take a deep breath, savor the faintly salty herbal aroma, and prepare to journey deeper into the segmented sleep world, complete with uninvited nighttime visitors. You catch a faint, pleasant scent the moment you step into the village cottage. A magic potion, but the medieval art of pleasant smelling. Since full-body bathing was considered too dangerous, masking one's natural odors became a matter of survival. You begin with the pomander, a small sphere carved from a dried apple, hollowed out and filled with rose petals, cloves, and cinnamon bark, then worn around the neck or tucked into a pocket. With every step, a warm fragrance drifts around you like a scented shield against sweat and far worse. As early as the 11th century, after Arab monastics introduced flower distillation techniques to Europe, French and German abbeys began producing rudimentary floral waters. In 1190, the abbess Hildegard of Bingen praised her rose water for its power to inspire calm in the soul. This historical note shows medieval folk were not merely superstitious. They applied a form of early chemistry to create what they believed to be antibacterial weapons. Not everyone could distill in a monastery, though. Commoners and especially wealthy nobles pursued exotic perfumes imported from Italy or the Middle East, often made with civet, a secretion from the musk cat, frankincense, and rose. Imagine a Grand Duke dabbing eau de civet at his temples before a banquet, filling the entire court with an oddly seductive aroma. A single small vial might cost as much as a family's annual farmland income, but at least it kept the flies at bay. In the morning market, you see townsfolk weaving tiny linen sachets filled with wormwood and dried lavender, then tying them to hats or neckcloths. Before approaching a magistrate or priest, they inhale deeply, confident in their unwashed attire. Little-known fact: wormwood was valued not just for its fragrance, but also for its reputed ability to ward off evil spirits of folk. Belief only loosely related to Hippocratic theories of miasma. On sweltering summer days, a noble's servants launder his handcloths and footcloths daily in warm apple cider vinegar infused with cloves. They wring them out and gently pat them on your palms, soles and underarms, imparting a refreshing coolness. Some aristocratic households even made crude soap from animal fat and wood ash, smearing it on cloths before wiping your skin. It left your skin as dry and cracked as a shedding snake, but it dramatically reduced body odor. This cloud of pleasant scents also masked the pervasive smells of stables, cow dung, and the fish market. If you lived beside a tannery, where noxious dyes and cyanide-like fumes filled the air, a single sniff of your pomander could transport you elsewhere. Historians still debate whether these scent-masking strategies genuinely warded off plague or simply offered a collective placebo, giving medieval folk a comforting illusion of safety. Other eccentric tactics existed too, drilling tiny holes in shoe heels and stuffing them with wood ash or dried orange peel, so that each footstep released faint notes of spice throughout a room. While this aromatic footwear may sound fantastical, similar methods were adopted by certain Eastern European nobles, proving these tricks transcended regional boundaries. Noble women often carried small linen fans, scented with peppermint or orange blossom oil, continually waving them around their faces. You might observe a duchess fluttering her fan both, to showcase her pale hand and fresh breath, and to waft a discreet perfume like a walking advertisement for cleanliness. At night, you climb into your damp straw bed, but you don't abandon your aromatic sachet. In the half-light, you inhale deeply to drown out the grunts of the household pig in the corner and the furtive rustlings of mice beneath the straw. This is your last defense, a scented bag hung at your bedside. In some regions, families replace these sachets annually before Samhain, a festival akin to Halloween, believing an old sachet's fragrance loses its potency against wandering spirits. These scents also play a role in religious ritual. On Christmas Eve, a few drops of precious incense oil, often frankincense, added to the hearth's embers, sending sweet smoke through the rafters. In practice, burning incense helped repel flies and neutralize cooking odors, but most medieval people insisted it was a spiritual purification. Finally, you settle under your nightcap, carrying that gentle aroma into your two-phase sleep cycle. But remember, this entire apparatus of pleasant smells is just a temporary mask, hiding the chaos and hazards lurking at the edges of your senses. Close your eyes now, and let us move on to the secret world of dreams. As you're just enjoying the lavender and orange peel sachet at your belt, gently bow your head and consider the final call of nature at day's end. Fear not, the marvelous journey into medieval interiors continues, leading you through the world of privies and drainage systems, where technology was not always about watering the garden. Imagine yourself in a grand ducal palace. In reality, the royal toilet was a small chamber called a garderobe. You would sit upon a stone seat with a gap in the floor, and everything dropped straight into the moat below. In 1386, when King Richard II rebuilt the White Tower in London, they even designed the garderobe to empty directly into the Thames, solving sanitation and daring anyone to swim near the banks. This notable historical moment shows that no matter how lavish the palace, the problem of waste disposal still relied on gravity and river water. As for the common folk, they used a communal pit at the village corner or a chamber pot, a ceramic bowl kept beside the bed. When full, you simply shouted, "Guard low, dirty water here," like hailing a taxi, then dumped it straight into the street. City dwellers sometimes carried a wicker basket of chamber pots, practicing orchard-style gutter cleanup, right on the pavement. You thought civilization was advanced? Remember, squatting above a gaping hole could still count as cultural exchange. Occasionally, large towns installed open gutters running down the streets, but these rarely had covers. Rain would wash refuse and excrement into blockages akin to rush hour traffic. The resulting stench drifted everywhere, attracting flies in masses like a free audience. Rats treated these open drains as all-you-can-eat buffets, freely roaming the communal privy. A little-known fact. In 14th century Toulouse, watchmen once installed a wooden speaking tube from the latrine trough up to the Lord's chamber so he could warn servants of the perfusion of foul air before opening the door. A brutally earnest form of medieval Airbnb etiquette. Of course, not every place was equally primitive. Some prosperous castles in France and Germany installed stone channels beneath the floor, leading straight to an outer moat. These drains had wooden lids to prevent falling in. Yet this solution still relied on gravity and luck. A heavy rainfall could dislodge the cover, leaving you waking in a puddle of mysterious filth. Historians still debate the safety of medieval sewage. Some argue that dumping waste into rivers helped spread plague, while others insist that flushing out refuse actually reduced urban flooding. For you, the idea of a private bathroom exists only in fantasy. In reality, the toilet room was usually a separate wooden hut tucked beside the kitchen, its door always open, and only a few steps from the chicken coop and vegetable baskets. Late at night, you'd hear your neighbor's rumbling recital through the earthen wall enough to wake you several times. If you wanted to avoid a nocturnal potty party, best to don wooden clogs that click across the floor so you know when to steer clear. In the city's sanitation science, you'd witness comical scenes. Fishmongers balancing tubs of dead fish at the street corner, while passers-by lifted their hats to avoid the specialty aroma. The diligent ones used wooden planks underfoot, avoiding the death arena in the middle of the road. That's when you'd think, oh, I'm so glad I'm not here. Surprisingly, some towns even charged a waste discharge fee. Homes of minor nobles or wealthy merchants paid a cesspit tax to fund latrine maintenance. In return, they were allowed to fit a small filter of gravel or crushed shells under the garderobe, opening trapping coarse debris before it descended into the pit below. A primitive green initiative, yet in their day it fostered communal responsibility. Back in the royal court, the king's privy often linked directly to his private chapel. While relieving himself, he could say prayers to send his spirit blissfully skyward. In 1236, King Henry III famously held a mass for his soul right next to his newly built garderobe, combination of letting go the body and a sacred rite. This event shows that, in the eyes of religious authority, bodily functions could also carry spiritual significance. You may dream of today's high-tech toilets with bidet sprays and fragrance diffusers, but the Middle Ages offered mobile flower pots. Hollowed, out apples or pomegranates were stuffed with vinegar, scented cloth and placed in latrines to mask odors. This sounds like a medieval chemistry escape room, but in fact it was standard practice across 15th century England. These oddball odor control strategies also extended to village life. Travellers would walk along hedgerows so that privy waste wouldn't spill onto main paths. Fowl were confined in coops all summer to reduce pollution. Villagers near Wessex even held a spring cleansing festival to empty and renew the communal dung python ingenious two-in-one solution, sanitation plus fertilizer for the fields. Yet no matter how inventive you were, everything still depended on the weather. Heavy rains could flood the pit, sending filthy water toward the churchyard. Sweltering heat would bake the filth into pungent gas, swirling down the alley. That was the true mental torture of living without modern drainage. You'd have no more reason to complain about getting stuck in a public restroom today. At least now you have toilet paper. Now that you've pictured royal ablutions and chamber pot karaoke beneath the stars, let your mind drift lightly into the humorous misery of medieval hygiene. Tonight, before you nestle under your snug blanket, offer a silent thanks for the pipes and faucets of the 21st century. Next, we'll slip into the misty realm of medieval dreams. After you've just escaped the feast of flies and dung flying through every alley, you step into another equally daunting adventure. Laundry in the Middle Ages, when washing machines hadn't been invented, and soap was as rare and precious as a miracle cure. You lug around a barrel of urine collected from chamber pots, known simply as chamber lye, taking advantage of its natural ammonia to scrub out stubborn stains. Each washing season, folks swap the secret to soaking their garments overnight. The next morning they haul them to the river and give them a vigorous beating with wooden clubs, or smash them against river stones until frothy foam forms like an impromptu wrist and forearm workout. Then you stretch the clothes out on a line or drape them over a beam in the courtyard, occasionally startled by the clank of iron hooks or a gust of wind sending a wet sleeve sailing toward your neighbour's fence. In 802, Charlemagne's Capitulare de Villiers decree instructed every estate to maintain a basic soap-making workshop, planting wood ash and reserving animal fat for laundry supplies. A historical reminder that cleaning one's clothes was never as simple as turning a faucet in our era. But the formula itself posed challenges. Rendered pig or sheep fat, combined with charred wood ash, produced a coarse soap block that smelled of smoke so pungently you'd question your own wakefulness. You smear the paste onto a rough cloth and scrub fabric vigorously, holding your breath to avoid inhaling the fumes. Just kidding, don't hold it so long you pass out before your clothes get clean. Meanwhile, poorer villagers lacking chamber lie improvised with whatever they had at hand. Dregs of wine, rice water mixed with fireplace ash, or even rainwater containing soot. Those with a knack for creativity toss in cloves, dried orange peel, or sprigs of sage into the wash basin to mask odors, a so-called natural combo that even modern spas might hesitate to replicate. Once it's time to dry, you must watch the weather like a hawk, because a single drizzle can turn freshly laundered linen into damp rubber, forcing you to beat and hang everything again. Time-consuming and exhausting as climbing a hill, to be sure. Slightly better off households keep dedicated coarse linens as signature cloths for washing face, hands and feet, laundering them frequently and swapping them out like luxury accessories to conceal any lingering stench on outer garments. If you run out of time to wash bulky outerwear, slipping into a relatively fresh linen shift-washed only a few times a week was deemed relatively clean, just enough to carry yourself confidently before officials or clergy. Interestingly, folk wisdom held that washing too thoroughly robs garments of their spirit. Legend says that blacksmiths' or carpenters' clothes were deliberately left stained because those marks signified authenticity and professional experience, like a badge of honor. Historians still debate whether this is mere folklore or reflects a real cultural layer in medieval village life. By contrast, the nobility employed an entire retinue dedicated to laundry. Eunuchs and chambermaids would heat enormous cauldrons of water, dilute the coarse soap, and stir until a frothy white foam formed before immersing the garments. This ritual followed feasts or hunting parties, when cloaks and mantles reeked of wine and game. Some palaces even boasted separate laundry chambers, with spouts draining soapy water directly into the castle moata. Vivid statement of status and distinction from the common folk. A little-known event occurred in 1348, when the Black Death swept through Europe. Some French monasteries burned all their chamber lye barrels, fearing that disease lurked in the urine they'd been hoarding. Extreme as it was, the act illustrates how shaky knowledge about disease germ origins directly shaped laundering habits. Humorously, at a time when dirty water was feared as a source of plague, the use of urine or rainwater, both laden with impurities, was widely embraced. You might think, well, at least my clothes are cleaner than those barrels. But don't be too smug. The belief that dirty water banishes dirt once led to everyday garments being washed by a quick dip into a vat of murky liquid. Still, not every medieval practice was misguided. Linen naturally wicks away moisture and has mild antibacterial qualities, so simply swapping out your shift a few times reduced bacteria significantly. Moreover, the smoky scent of native soap acted as a light disinfectant, preventing that musty stink from setting in. That's why the homebrew soap, crude as it was, remained trusted long before industrial detergents yet to be invented came along. Thus, laundry in the Middle Ages was truly a battle between grime, microbes, and the whims of the weather. Picture this. You wait for a bright day to dry your work-worn garments, but a sudden drizzle soaks them through again, forcing a repeat of the pounding and hanging process until your hands feel like leather. Only then can you don a relatively clean linen shift and stride into the Great Hall without worrying about being met with wails of disapproval. So, if you're ever grumbling about your modern laundry chores, smile, you at least have a washing machine and detergent. And remember that wherever you go, doing laundry is an unspoken conversation with history. Each time you hit that cotton extra clean cycle, you're echoing centuries of your ancestors' hard-won struggle. Are you ready for the next challenge? Imagine you've just finished scrubbing every fiber of your shirt and spent the morning wrestling with a bucket of soapy water. Now step back in time 4,500 years to walk the streets of Mohenjo-Daro. You stride down straight, brick-paved avenues laid out in a perfect grid, each block intersected at right angles, just like a miniature ancient Manhattan. There's no puddles of stagnant rinse water or the stench of chamber pots spun off your neighbor's window, because here, every house boasts its own private bathing room, with a gently sloping floor that drains into covered stone gutters beneath the streets. Mohenjo-Daro, the thriving heart of the Indus Valley civilization, circa 2600–1900 BCE, wasn't only vast in scale, but also marvelously hygienic. Excavators famously uncovered the Great Bath, a brick-lined pool, roughly the size of a modern small swimming pool, thought to serve communal cleansing or ritual purification. Scholars still debate its exact purpose. Historians continue to argue whether it was a sacred cleansing tank or simply a public bath. But few ancient sites invested so heavily in one structure, devoted entirely to washing. Beneath layers of hardened mud, standard-sized bricks, about 28 times 14 times 7 centimeters, bear neatly carved channels, once occupied by ceramic drain pipes that connected every household to the city's underground sewer. Ingeniously, small triangular grates trapped stray leaves, animal hair, and even the occasional unlucky rat, preventing blockages deeper in the system. You'd never worry about stepping over open, foul-smelling ditches. Every drain in Mohenjo-Daro was capped and maintained, a feature rare even in later Roman cities. Stroll along the main streets, 7 to 13 meters wide, and you'll notice how orderly everything feels. Dwellings abut one another, each with a little courtyard for laundry or keeping poultry, but nothing obstructs the flow of traffic. If you're grumbling about your own clogged pipes today, take heart. Mohenjo-Daro had its plumbing and a functional sewage network long before the Romans built the Cloaca Maxima. Archaeologists have mapped how sewage chambers sat beneath stairwells and away from drinking wells. When monsoon rains swelled groundwater levels, the drains simply overflowed into larger public conduits, preventing the cesspits from flooding. As one scholar quipped, they solved sanitation before the Romans laid their first sewer brick. Remarkably, this sanitation was universal. Not just the elite enjoyed private toilets. Common households also had latrines draining into the street, so hygiene wasn't a privilege but a right. If you've ever cursed your neighborhood's stinking gutter, imagine the envy of living where every home shared clean water access and robust drainage thousands of years ago. At its height, Mohenjo-Daro may have housed 40,000 to 60,000 people, all served by a year-round sewer network. During the rains, auxiliary channels carried overflow away. Despite heavy monsoons, the city streets only felt damp rather than flooded. Compared with medieval European towns, where open ditches teeming with rats and flies were the norm, the Indus city's covered drains must have seemed miraculous. Sir John Marshall's large-scale excavations in 1922 revealed the full extent of brick-paved lanes and underground pipes, earning Mohenjo-Daro UNESCO World Heritage status in 1980. To this day, experts debate why the city was abandoned. Was it climate change? Economic collapse? Internal conflict? Yet the loss of such an advanced public health system remains one of archaeology's greatest puzzles. Historians still dispute what caused Mohenjo-Daro's decline: natural disaster, economic crisis, or social upheaval. So next time you wrench open a stubborn manhole or mutter about Monday's sewer backups, remember Mohenjo-Daro, where communal baths, private toilets, and a covered sewer network existed before written records were even complete. Civilizations may rise and fall, but that 4,500-year-old drainage grid endures, reminding us that some ideas like flushing our waste away are truly timeless. Step through the massive Ishtar Gate's cobalt blue tiles and imagine yourself on Babylon's grand processional way, circa 575 BCE, under King Nebuchadnezzar II. Here, every brick, every curve of street, and every shrine is part of a meticulously planned ritual landscapean urban theatre designed to link mortals with gods. Babylon's centerpiece was the sacred axis, a wide boulevard that ran straight from the Ziggurat Etemenanki, house of the foundation of heaven and earth, to the great temple of Marduk at Esagila. During the New Year festival, priests and the king himself would process this route in lavish ceremony, carrying statues and offerings. It wasn't mere parade ground, but a living symbol of cosmic order, humanity walking hand in hand with divinity. Beyond spectacle, Babylon's hydraulic engineering fed into its ritual life. The Euphrates River coursed through the city, its banks lined with quays for merchant boats bringing incense, lapis lazuli, and grain. Water was channeled off via simple but effective drains carved of brick, forming rudimentary sewers that carried wastewater back to the river, so that even after festival crowds and market stalls dispersed, the streets would wash themselves clean with the next tide. Neighborhoods in Babylon were zoned with surprising clarity. Craftsmen's workshops clustered near the riverfront, where easy access to cooling mud brick kilns was essential. Merchant caravans set up shops in adjacent bazaars, sheltered by colonnaded porticos against sun and rain. Further inland, you'd find quieter residential quarters, slid neatly between gardens irrigated by clay aqueducts. At night, you'd hear water trickling in cisterns, reminders that in Babylon, even leisure and sleep were woven into the city's circulatory system. A little-known detail, beneath some private homes, archaeologists have uncovered small, vaulted waste pits lined with glazed bricks, miniature bathrooms that predate Rome's latrines by centuries. The pit's glazed surface resisted seepage, suggesting an early understanding of hygiene that contradicts Babylon's popular image as a hedonistic urban monster. Historians still debate whether the processional way was added after Etemenanki's reconstruction, or if it was always intended to directly connect palace, ziggurat, and temple. Notes one recent survey of Babylonian urbanism. Did the city evolve organically, or was Nebuchadnezzar's master plan laid out from day one? The evidence remains tantalizingly inconclusive. Walking those ancient streets, you'd pass reliefs of striding lions guardians, flanking the Ishtar Gatich, one embossed with rosettes and stylized manes. Their presence was more than decoration. They embodied Ishtar's protective ferocity, reminding you that in Babylon, religion and city planning were inseparable. By night, torches lit the processional route. Saffron-scented incense billowed upwards, drifting toward the ziggurat's summit. Your sandals echoed on polished bricks as you paused by a side street drain still open after thousands of years and felt a faint current whisper, reminders of the river god's constant presence. In Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, urban forms served divine function. Gates were thresholds between human and sacred realms. Streets were pilgrimage paths, and water channels were lifelines for both bodies and souls. Though empires rise and fall, the echoes of Babylon's ritual grid endure in every palace procession, every sacred axis. The enduring lesson that in the ancient world, to build a city was to choreograph a cosmology. You've just left the sacred avenues of Babylon behind, and now a tropical breeze carries us back in time to the heart of Central America over a millennium ago, when the city of Teotihuacan rose as a planning marvel that would leave anyone who set foot in it utterly awestruck. You find yourself at the head of the Avenue of the Dead, Avenida de los Muertos, the city's main thoroughfare stretching 2 kilometers, flanked on both sides by the massive Pyramid of the Sun and Pyramid of the Moon, standing as perfectly aligned sentinels like Manhattan's grid, only without the skyscrapers and far less traffic. Around the first 7th centuries CE, Teotihuacan peaked at some 125,000 inhabitants, making it the largest city in the Americas at the time. Archaeologists agree this was no accident. It was a triumph of urban design, not just the preserve of Mesopotamia or medieval Europe. As you stroll along the avenue, the bright sunlight glints off the polished limestone pavement, each footstep echoing like a heartbeat in a cleared stadium. Imagine attending the festival of Tlaloc, the rain god, at the temple of Tlaloc beside the Pyramid of the Sun Pilgrims, offering maize, cacao, and mother-of-pearl shells for a bountiful harvest. This is a well-documented historical event, the multi-week rain, invocation rituals so vital to agricultural life. Beneath that grandeur lies a lesser-known secret. Extensive apartment, style residential complexes once discovered here, complete with hidden rainwater channels running beneath shared courtyards. These multi-family dwellings could house hundreds. Each household had its own room yet shared a central courtyard and drainage system. Picture a modern condo block without elevators, and with rather more squabbles over water usage. Scholars still debate who built Teotihuacan. Some argue it was constructed by the indigenous Otomi people, while others point to strong Zapotec influences from southern Mexico. There's also controversy over the Avenue of the Dead itself. Was it simply the city's main boulevard, or a sacred axis for funeral processions? If only ancient Google Maps had a ceremonial route, layer finding your way would have been far less mysterious. The city layout is a masterclass in zoning. Residential quarters interlock with craft workshop spotters next to lime lockers, artisan neighborhoods grouped together, while market stalls lined side channels that carried rainwater into covered drains. Unlike many ancient cities that let rainwater pool in the streets, Teotihuacan harnessed it. You can almost hear the soft susurrus of water trickling through stone-lined gutters as you descend a pyramid step, whispering the city's ingenuity. Imagine waking at dawn after climbing the 43M Pyramid of the Moon. From that vantage point you see a checkerboard of blocks and boulevards unfolding beneath you. This grid plan is eerily reminiscent of modern Washington, D.C. for the diagonals that let you cut your film shots at cool angles. Even the tiniest alleyways were paved at a slight incline to shed water, and surprisingly, to let breezes clear dust and debris, reducing daily sweeping duties. Some historians speculate this was an early form of green planning. Tree-lined promenades provided shade on hot days and kept dust from swirling into living quarters. One can almost wish for similar elevated greenways on our urban news feeds. Of course, such meticulous planning served ritual and power as much as practicality. At sunset, when the sun bathes the limestone in blood-red light, you can almost sense crowds processing with maize offerings, and not a single smartphone in sight. And yes, scholars still argue whether the Avenue of the Dead was used for royal funerals alone or open to all citizens during agricultural festivals. Even in ancient city design, debate and dissent bloomed, igniting your curiosity all over again. Finally, as you place your hand on the cool volcanic stone, you sense not only the political might behind Teotihuacan's pyramids, but the communal spirit woven into every street and drain. This was a city built so that everyone from craftsperson to priest had shelter, water, and a place in the ritual heart of the metropolis. Now you see, urban planning is no exclusive invention of the 21st century. It was practiced over 1,500 years ago in the New World by people of vision and ingenuity. Let this story lull you into dreams of ancient cities, where every brick and every channel whispers of humanity's age-old quest to harmonize nature, community, and the divine. Sleep well, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell if you want to continue wandering through medieval and even more distant realms. You've just left the straight avenues of Teotihuacan, and now you find yourself on the parched plateau of the Indus Valley, where three cities, Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and Lothal, drew the world's first shared urban blueprint more than 4,000 years ago. You step down onto a row of uniformly baked bricks, your feet brushing against a floor pitched just enough that rainwater would wash away smoothly. Imagine walking on a perfectly swept street with no litter or puddles in sight. This wasn't the whim of a single ruler, but proof of a planning genius spread across the entire region. Mohenjo-Daro, at its peak between 2,600 and 1,900 BCE, pioneered the idea of a private bathing room in every house. Each little chamber sloped gently so water would run out into covered drains beneath the streets. If you were to brush away the centuries of silt, you'd glimpse the ceramic pipes linking every household cistern to the city's main channels. This was a historic breakthrough. Hygiene for every citizen, rich or poor, was recognized as a basic right, not a luxury. Just a few dozen kilometers east lay Harappa Mohenjo, Daro's twinware standard-sized bricks in the ratio 1. 2 to 4 allowed builders to stack walls quickly and accurately, saving countless cubits of measuring time. Remarkably, that precise ratio was used consistently for 6 centuries, showing not only shared street layouts, but also uniform building materials throughout the Indus civilization. Your journey takes you further east to Lothal, home to the world's first artificial dock around 2400 BCE. Tidal gates controlled the harbor's water level so merchant ships from the Persian Gulf could dock safely. Storerooms lined the canal like a 4,500-year-old container port, where sesame seeds were traded for lapis lazuli and carnelian beads. This key event proves international trade was flourishing even before the Great Pyramid of Giza was completed. Here's a little-known detail. Every Lothal house also had a separate refuse pit beside its rainwater tank courtesy of ancient trash management. Food scraps went into their own pit, protecting drinking water from contamination and granting them a rudimentary but effective erodent deterrent. Yet scholars still hotly debate how this pan-Indus standardization came about. Historians argue whether the Indus cities were unified by a single centralized authority or simply a network of merchants and artisans freely exchanging planning techniques. Some claim a regional government-imposed uniform regulations. Others see a cooperative guild culture that spread consistency organically. Feel the breeze of the monsoon stirring through those straight alleyways, carrying dust away and reminding you that good planning isn't just about rigid grids, but also adapting to nature. Around 1900 BCE, catastrophic flooding swept through all three cities, a tragic historical crisis that ultimately led to their decline, but also sparked the modern discipline of archaeology when British excavations of Mohenjo-Daro began in the late 19th century. You might smile at the thought, in 1900 BCE they had to shut down their drainage network, whereas last month you only worried about shutting off a dripping showerhead. Imagine complaining about low water pressure while they faced the undoing of entire cities. Those buried drains, once covered by stone slabs, now lie silent beneath layers of earth waiting to be rediscovered, like a buried treasure hunt tracing humanity's first right to sanitation. Even more astonishing, the same standard bricks and drainage channels appear not just in those three major cities but in small settlements all along the Gagahakra River. It wasn't the edict of a lone despot but a shared urban culture carried by migrating artisans, traders and engineers. Picture villagers packing a sample brick in their satchel when moving to a new town like carrying a resume of masonry skills. It's amusing, but that's exactly how they ensured every new street or wall followed the same rhythm. And you see, even after 4,500 years, that legacy reminds us how crucial shared standards and knowledge sharing are. Think you need ISO certifications and modern regulations? The Indus people were already nailing standardization, while we were still figuring out how to invent the wheel. Before you drift off, picturing silent waterways flowing beneath ancient streets, remember, history isn't a dusty list of events, but a story of people collaborating to build a better future. And you, right now, are stepping into this millennia-spanning journey without a time machine, just with your imagination and a steady, sleepy breath. Sweet dreams beneath those steadfast ancient drains. You've just left the quiet waterways of the Indus grid behind, and now we step into sun-baked Hispania, where a boy born in 76 CE would shake the Roman Empire to its core. Picture yourself on the cobbled streets of Italica frontier town once settled by Roman veterans where Hadrian, future emperor, drew his first breath amid the disciplined drumbeats and incense smoke of ritual. The sweat of training drills, the scent of freshly baked bread, and the Mediterranean breeze mingle into a vivid tableau you rarely glimpse in stone-inscribed histories. Orphaned around 9 or 10, Hadrian was taken under the wing of Trajan, the famed general turned emperor. Imagine a teenager navigating the marble halls of imperial Rome, while servants dust the corridors and historians whisper, "Did Trajan secretly engineer this adoption for political gain?" Scholars still debate whether it was pure pragmatism or a genuine act of kindness from a commander. You can almost hear cicadas chirping against Italica's walls as young Hadrian memorizes Homer and falls for Greek philosophy, and you think, this future emperor is more likely to hug a scroll than brandish a sword. 3 light jokes might flicker through your mind. While Caesar was off conquering Gaul, Hadrian was busy spelling alpha, beta, gamma. Other rulers forged armor, but Hadrian forged his soul. And if you assumed all Roman emperors guzzled wine, Hadrian was sipping Greek tea. In 117, when Trajan died, the imperial title quietly passed to Hadrian. This seismic event sent ripples through Rome's elite. The legions murmured, the Senate fidgeted. Hadrian ascended and made a jaw-dropping decision, withdrew from newly conquered provinces to shore up the frontiers. Picture the young king torn between planting his victory flag and summoning builders to carve his name into stone. And so Hadrian chose the wall. Imagine yourself standing in wind-swept Britain, the chill whipping through your hair, your hand on a cold stone that was the birth of Hadrian's wall, a 117-kilometer barrier proclaiming, "This is Rome. Beyond here, you're on your own." It was more than a fortification. It was a manifesto of stability. Turning south, Hadrian arrived in Athens, lit incense to the gods, and launched the revival of Olympiathi site of the ancient games. You can hear hammers tapping softly against dusty columns, with a voice whispering. Historians still argue whether this was a tribute to Greece or a clever public relations gambit. Either way, amid the smoke and rubble, Hellenic spirit roared back to life. And in Rome, he didn't forget his imperial home, the Pantheon. Close your eyes and imagine that vast concrete dome with its oculus yawning overhead, sunlight pouring in to form a perfect circle on the marble floor. Rebuilding the Pantheon in 126 CE was a marvel of Roman engineering so advanced. You wonder, did they telekinetically guide those materials into place? You might catch the faint clink of trowels and the scent of pitch in the imperial workshop and ask yourself, did Hadrian stand there hand in hand with his masons debating dome curvature? The Pantheon's completion was not just an architectural milestone, but the stamp of an emperor who built rather than conquered. Back in Hispania, Hadrian's first love stirred. He cherished his homeland, but adored Greek sunshine. A little-known fact. He collected seashells from Cardiz's shores, inlaying thousands into villa mosaics. You laugh to yourself. He built wall sand a shell collection. But Hadrian wasn't without critics. Historians still debate his brutal suppression of the Bar Kokhba revolt, 132-136 CE. In Judea, bloody upheaval that shattered Roman-Jewish relations. Picture the emperor poring over battle maps, sighing, defending Britain was tough enough. Crushing a desert rebellion? Brutal. In the end, you sense that Hadrian was more than a strategic ruler. He was a cultural architect, a builder, and an itinerant traveller of the empire. Born in Hispania, raised in Rome's glory, ever enamored with Greek letters, he stands as a testament to the power of vision over violence. Tonight, as you rest your head upon a mugwort pillow conjuring, dreams free of mosquito, bites close your eyes, and imagine that distant palace, where war drums gave way to the rhythm of chisels and the lullaby of the Pantheon. Sleep well, no Hadrian's wall needed to keep out invaders, at least not in your dreams. The moment Hadrian, the emperor of architects and philosophers, is mentioned, you're whisked away from the bustle of Rome to his grand villa at Tivoli, where he left his mark on the entire empire. Here you stroll down a long gallery decorated with reliefs of the Nile, pass through gateways framed by Greek columns, and find yourself in a courtyard that even includes a scaled-down pantheon. At every turn, vaulted ceilings painted with phoenixes hover overhead, and staircases spiral down into a miniature garden of reflecting pools you half expect to zoom around like in an open-world game. Antinous, the youth whose beauty rivaled myth, whom Hadrian adored, drowned in the Nile in 130 CE. In Tivoli, you sense the pall of mourning in the palace. Mosaic floors of shell, and a marble statue of Antinous, with damp hair and eyes gazing toward the horizon. Hadrian built a dedicated temple to the divine Antinous, commissioning hundreds of bronze statues whose golden eyes glittered candlelight at night. Monthly rites were held. Incense of myrrh and beeswax, mingled with honey and rose-petal dust, filling the air with solemn sweetness. Strangely, after Antinous' death, many women flocked to the temple in secret, believing the god's image could bless their marriages. Some claim to have dreamt Antinous visiting them in the dark, offering words of love and comfort. Historians still debate Hadrian's true motive in deifying Antinous. Was it a genuine act of devotion, or a political move to win hearts and craft the image of a benevolent emperor? But the joy did not last. In 132 CE, Giudionce called Jerusalem ignited in the Bar Kokhba revolt. The spark seemed simple. Hadrian renamed the city Aelia Capitolina and began building a Jupiter temple on sacred Jewish ground. Imagine standing before a holy city, hearing hammers erect an unholy altarwood, new foundations erase ancestral memory. To the Jews, this was an insult, igniting a rebellion led by Simon Bar Kokhba, son of the Star. Guerrilla tactics, secret hideouts, villagers armed with daggers and stones ambushing Roman supply lines. This was no clash of armored legions, but an uprising of common folk. Hadrian the emperor, who once built a wall across Britain, responded without mercy. He sent his finest legions to Judea, sealed the region, and razed villages to the ground. The toll was horrific. Nearly 500,000 dead, civilians included. Aelia lay in ruins. Every trace of Jewish heritage was bulldozed. Through the drizzle, you hear Roman legions cheering, their purple and gold standards waving over charred fields. You wonder at Roman ruthlessness, but for them, crushing revolt was the only choice. Afterward, Judea was renamed Syria Palestina, calculated erasure of Jewish identity. Historians still argue over the scale and nature of Hadrian's reprisals. Some say only insurgents suffered, while ancient Roman accounts speak of wholesale slaughter. The truth likely lies in between. Imagine women and children swept up in the flames, painting history in shades far darker than black and white. Back at Tivoli, amidst soaring marble walls, you feel the contrast. On one side, opulent Roman art and public mourning for Antinous. On the other, the echo of war drums and flickering torches in Judea. Here Hadrian displayed both civilization and iron rule. Now lie down on your straw mattress draped with fine linen and dream of those golden-eyed statues glowing in candlelight. Tell yourself, perhaps Hadrian was the only emperor to fuse architecture and bloodshed into one dance of power. A raindrop taps the eaves, a breeze stirs the columns, and the distant roll of drums fades into the night, lulling you into a deep, sovereign sleep. You've just witnessed Hadrian's trials and triumphs across the empire, and now you can still feel his breath in that candlelit chamber by the Tiber. Imagine yourself seated beside an empty throne, watching the emperor who once walked every province draw his final sigh beneath the green hill of Tivoli. In this moment, you sense the last flicker of a man who shaped an era. In his final years, beginning around 133 CE, Hadrian was beset by chronic illness. Picture him, pausing mid-verse, as a sudden cardiac pain halts his pen, forcing him to scrawl a farewell to mortality. Animula, vagula, blandula, hospes, comesque, corporis. Little wandering soul, gentle guest and companion of the body. Few know that he may have even attempted a quiet suicide to end his suffering, only to awaken the next morning and resume composing his elegiac poetry. Amid the lush lawns of Tivoli, Hadrian chose two successors. First, his devoted friend Antoninus Pius, and through Antoninus's adoption, the philosopher Marcus Aurelius. This wasn't merely personal favor, but the opening salvo of the 5 good emperors, a half-century of peace and prosperity. Antoninus's elevation in 138 CE remains the defining moment that ushered in this golden age. Yet historians still debate whether Hadrian truly judged Marcus Aurelius's abilities, raising a philosopher to rule in turbulent Timsor, simply sought to preserve Hellenic influence at court. Some argue Hadrian set a trap by choosing an untested heir. Others believe it was a sage strategy to pass on his Greek-tinged ideal of governance. In his final days, Hadrian rarely left his villa. Envision him in his study, the air heavy with the scent of aged parchment, a gilded statue of Antinous gazing silently over his shoulder. Outside, the soft rustle of leaves reminds him and you that even emperors are but small parts of nature. He spent his hours drafting letters, revising laws, and wrestling with the question of how to defend the frontiers without sacrificing the soul of the empire. A little-known detail: though gravely ill, he still received embassies from Byzantium, Egypt, and the Tigris region. He insisted on hearing Greek lyre music to soothe his failing heart. Private concerts that became legendary. The emperor, head bowed, murmuring Homeric verses as the strings trembled in the candlelight. You may recall the letter he wrote to Marcus Aurelius, reminding his adopted son that to govern is not merely to wield power, but to care for the souls of your people. Under his pen, Stoic principles permeated every decree. Armies deployed only when absolutely necessary. Taxes kept light so farmers could sow and reap, and officials at all levels held to the same impartial law. These innovations laid the groundwork for the imperial legal system that Marcus and Lucius Verus would later champion in the Pax Antonina. Reading Hadrian's final will and edicts, you see his concern. Preserve Greek culture. Do not let the eastern provinces forget the sound of the lyre and the life of philosophy. Because of this charge, after his death, Marcus Aurelius maintained Athenian academies and patronized artists across the empire. A curious footnote: in some Syrian provinces, annual festivals were held in Hadrian's honor as a cultural protector long after his passing. At last, in 138 CE, Hadrian took his final breath. Imagine the hush as courtiers murmured prayers, floral wreaths strewn across the empty throne room. Contemporary accounts report that when the funeral bells tolled over Rome, both rich and poor wept as if a piece of the empire's soul had been torn away. After 3 days of grand rites, his ashes were entombed in the mausoleum we now call Castel Sant'Angelo, on the Tiber's banks, its silhouette standing guard through the centuries. Hadrian's legacy is far more than the Great Wall in Britain or the enduring concrete dome of the Pantheon. He became the model of the philosopher, emperor, one who tempered ambition with cultural patronage and provincial reforms that left a lasting imprint on architecture, law, and statesmanship. Tonight, if you trace your fingers along the stones of Hadrian's Wall and feel the north wind whistle through the gaps, ask yourself, in your dreams, will the spectre of that ailing but indomitable emperor guide you back to a world where sleep itself was a legacy in the making? And now, as the remnants of Roman roads fade from your mind, let's draw a new map stretching westward where history's pages record the Louisiana Purchase and an unprecedented expedition. One summer afternoon in 1803, President Thomas Jefferson signed the Louisiana Purchase Treaty with Francia, landmark deal of $15 million for over 800,000 square miles of territory. Picture the ink still fresh, Congress divided over the Constitution. Does the president have the authority to buy land without Congress? Many founders questioned its legality, yet Jefferson insisted, America cannot miss this golden opportunity. That official act flung open the door to the New World. But few realized that each acre of Louisiana costing less than 3 cents per English acre was an incredible bargain. The numbers would boggle your mind. The price of a modern cup of coffee for acres of boundless land, crisscrossed with rivers, endless grasslands, and diverse indigenous peoples. It's a little noticed fact, because the border had just expanded, and no one yet knew what dangers this vast test chamber held. Among the 33 members of the Louisiana Exploring Party was York William Clark's black servant whose role proved indispensable. To the uninitiated, his story might sound like bravado, but York was an unseen warrior of extraordinary endurance, diving into swamps to retrieve supplies that fell overboard. Tales of his exploits still astonish. Sometimes you need a Black John Wick in May of 1804. When May 1804 arrived, imagine 33 souls gathered on the Missouri's bank shunters, legionnaires, cartographers, and even a young pregnant Shoshone wife named Sacagawea pushing a crude keelboat downstream. The rhythmic clack of paddles and the soft whoosh of water beneath the hull formed an ASMR soundtrack strong enough to make you close your eyes and drift with every ripple. The story grows more thrilling when you learn they carried a mobile map room, compasses, sextants, pocket watches, and even small vials to collect water samples only, to discover that the legendary Northwest Passage didn't exist. In fact, an academic debate lingers. Did this expedition truly find a waterway to the Pacific, or was it the tragic folly of misplaced hope? Maritime scholars still argue whether the Columbia River could ever link seamlessly to the Missouri, but one thing is certain. They never found the straight route they dreamed of. Beyond mapping, Lewis and Clark meticulously catalogued every medicinal plant, river fish, and forest creature. People joked they were running a traveling botanical garden, collecting over 150 new plant species from desert wildflowers hidden in sand to climbing vines shaded by ancient oaks. On one occasion, Lewis stumbled upon the Venus flytrepan insect-eating marvel that left the team wide-eyed. If a plant can eat flies, who knows what witches lurk in those woods? Yet the journey wasn't all idyllic beauty. Picture bone-chilling winter nights, the campfire sputtering in the dark, mosquitoes swarming through the smoke, each buzz potentially your last gasp before malaria struck. In autumn 1804, upon reaching the icy Mandan villages in Dakota, the party built Fort Mandan, a makeshift resort of rough-hewn logs, sealed against the howling wind to stave off the cold, stockpile provisions, and negotiate with the Mandan for food and guidance. Here's a little-known detail. At Fort Mandan, Clark received a gift from a Mandan chiefer, massive deerhide cloak so warm, yet pungently odorous that the crew nicknamed it the Stink Liberation Cloak. It was a masterstroke of diplomacy, trading odd garments for food, while everyone thought, thanks, but I'm definitely pungent. Pressing on, they battled rapids, scaled mountain passes, and forded streams. In mid-1805, under the guidance of Sacagawea, indigenous Alice in Wonderland. They crossed the brutal Bitterroot Mountains, facing snow-clad peaks and gnawing hunger. One member quipped, "Snow makes the coldest swimming pool, but nothing chills you more than realizing your food stores are empty." A moment of dark humor that had everyone chuckling through chattering teeth. Finally, envision the historic moment. November 1805, after more than a year on the trail, they set foot on the Pacific shore. No cannon fire, just the steady crash of waves and weary smiles mingled with tears of joy. "We know our journey has succeeded," Clark wrote. "Yet our hearts grow heavy at what the return holds. It is that very anxiety, paired with hundreds of maps, thick journals, and specimen-laden packs, that became the legacy of the new America. Now, when you close your eyes and hear the oceans whisper, imagine yourself standing on that wild shore beneath endless skies, asking, 'How far could I paddle before my arms tire?' Each night as darkness falls, you can picture that Odyssey quest to find yourself in waves, forests, and uncharted maps and thrill at the thought, 'Tomorrow, I'll conquer the West with Lewis and Clark again.' And so your sleep is painted with epic adventure, both peaceful and burning, with a longing for discovery in your dreams. And so, with the echo of the Pacific's waves still ringing in your mind, you find yourself back in the snow-choked air of winter 1804-05. You huddle inside Fort Mandan, its rough-hewn logs stained by Missouri River ice, listening to the howl of prairie winds that feel like 1,000 tiny trumpets calling your name. It's here, among the Hidatsa and Mandan villages carved into the white landscape, that you meet Sacagawea, already a legend, even before her name is properly known to history, and her infant son, Jean-Baptiste, swaddled like a tiny treaty bundle in Lewis's arms. The fact is, Sacagawea's presence went far beyond mere symbolism. She carried messages in sign language, gathered edible roots, and even retrieved vital supplies when the keelboat capsized in April, act that might be the least celebrated but most critical rescue of the entire expedition. It's an oft-overlooked moment. This young Shoshone mother becomes both guide and guardian, a beacon of calm when the men's teeth chatter more from fear than cold. Come spring, as the melting ice drums its relentless percussion on the river's edge, you pack up Fort Mandan. The Missouri's current greets you like a lazy roller coaster, perfect for an ASMR whisper of whoosh, but deadly if you misjudge the swift. You navigate the Great Falls, a series of 5 cascades tumbling over 18 miles, with only dogged portage, dragging heavy boats over steep banks, each step a reminder that nature also means bring ibuprofen. It's here you learn to curse rapids under your breath and vow never to book another whitewater adventure tour in your life. Beyond the falls lies the Bitterroot Range, a spine of rock that laughs at your map and sneers at your boots. But thanks to Sacagawea's Shoshone kinmasters of these mountains, you trade wobbly canoes for sure-footed horses. You climb narrow ridges dusted in powder, your lungs burning like embers, but you press on. Here's a little-known nugget. The expedition's journals record a midnight sunrise on the Bitterroot, a phenomenon so eerie it convinced at least one hunter that he'd died and been dropped into the sun. By late 1805, after nearly a year on the trail, you crest the final pass and gaze westward steel-grey waves of the Pacific shimmering under a low sun. No fanfare greets you. Instead, there's the wet hiss of rain and the dull roar of waves crashing on an unseen shore. You build Fort Clatsop on the Oregon coast, a squat blockade against wind, rain, and the occasional overly enthusiastic seal. It's far from glamorous, more like a soggy cabin you'd never volunteer to rent on Airbnb, but it's home for the next brutal months. Through 1805-06, you scribble furiously in your journals by candlelight, while around you, the mosquitoes stage nightly conventions in your hair. You sample dried elk meat and trade wits with the Clatsop people, learning that 90% humidity and 0 sun can turn the sturdiest spirit into a marshmallow of despair. Yet you also gather botanical treasures, seaweeds that taste like salty velvet, driftwood lichens once thought to cure scurvy, and the echoes of humpback whales that breach just beyond your sight. Finally, when the rains slack and spring birds return, you turn your faces east. By the 23rd of September, 1806, you've paddled, walked, and ridden nearly 8,000 miles, enough to circumnavigate half the globe. Saint, Louis welcomes you not with trumpets, but with stunned silence, and the occasional, well, you made it, somehow. Your trunk bulges with maps that redraw a continent, specimen jars that rattle like Wonderland treasures, and journals so thick they double as doorstops. And here's the academic debate that still fires up scholars today. Did Lewis and Clark truly discover the American West, or simply inaugurate the long legacy of westward expansion ushering in displacement for countless indigenous nations? Historians grapple over whether this journey was an act of pure scientific curiosity or the first stroke in Manifest Destiny's ominous canvas. As you settle by the hearth tonight, listening to the crackle of burning oak like time itself snapping in two, you realize this expedition wasn't just a voyage, was a threshold between worlds. Tomorrow, when you close your eyes, let the rhythm of the Missouri's current and the Pacific's sigh carry you into a dream of endless horizons. Sleep well, knowing that every ripple in those great rivers once bore a party of explorers daring to chase the edge of history. All right, we've waded through the murky bathwater of the Middle Ages. From the terror of skipping full-body baths to the fine art of face wipes, hand washes, and sniffing yourself pleasant with vinegar and herbs. From combing every last flea out of your hair to brushing your teeth with soapberry charcoal and polishing them with honey. From nose-tingling pomanders to hurling chamber pots down the street with a hearty "Garda low." From laundering clothes in urine, cum ammonia, to the mysterious drainage grids of Mohenjo-Daro, the majestic walls of Babylon, and the pyramid-lined avenues of Teotihuacan. Then we leapt forward to Hadrian building his wall and his watery villas at Tivoli. And finally, Lewis and Clark fording streams, paddling down the Missouri, crossing the Bitter Roots, meeting Sacagawea, sniffing Pacific breezes, and returning laden with mountains of maps. Each chapter has been a plot twist, showing that sleep, sanitation, city planning, and the art of exploration all ride on tricks that are both absurd and ingenious. I hope you chuckled at the image of pots crashing onto cobblestones and sighed in awe at England's longest wall or the Indus Valley's perfect grid. Now close your eyes and let the creak of 4,500-year-old sewers lull you into an enchanted dream. Sleep well and dream adventures as epic as Lewis and Clark's. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell so you won't miss our next sleepy escapades.